So what I want to do to start this video today is to call up Mr. Peabody and Sherman and have them fire up the Wayback Machine. See, I want them to take us back to 1980 when a much younger and hotter version of myself walked into the Kawasaki dealership in Longview, Texas to purchase his first motorcycle. The bike that young Craig was interested in was a 1980 Kawasaki KZ440, the standard model. He added a windscreen, engine guards, and a passenger backrest, all for just over $1,500. At the time, he was working paycheck to paycheck installing swimming pools, making about $6 an hour, and that works out to be about $12,400 per year for 40 hours, but with overtime, he was making close to $20,000 per year. Now, this 20-year-old kid, just like most other young people back then, didn't have a lot of extra money to buy recreational vehicles. In fact, what he wanted to do was to use this as a way to transport himself to and from work and save a little money on gas. Now, for those of you who are interested, using the Bureau of Labor Statistics online inflation calculator, that $20,000 that young Craig was making back in 1980 is the equivalent of about $81,000 in today's money. And that $6 an hour rate that he was making, well, that's the equivalent of a little bit over $24 an hour today. Adjusted for inflation, that $1,500 Kawasaki KZ440 would cost you about $5,700 today. Now, to put that in perspective, a Yamaha MT-03, that is a much better motorcycle than that KZ440 was back in 1980. Well, you can pick that up for $49.99, at least that's the base price. Or a Kawasaki Z500, well, that goes for $55.99. And by the way, the average interest rates at that time to finance a car or a motorcycle was about 14%. In contrast, today, I can go down to my local credit union and I can get the same loan for 48 months, right? That would cost me 6.99%. In addition, when I purchased my Victory Vision in 2009, well, the interest rates were 5.99%. And if we go back to 2006, at the height of the motorcycle boom, just before everything came to a crash, well, the interest rate that I paid on my VN900, my Kawasaki VN900, was 6.7%. So I think this goes to show you that the interest rates that we have today are not unusually high, right? They're actually at what a normal interest rate would be, right? Those 2 and 3, 4% interest rates that we were fortunate to have during the 2000s and 2010s, well, they were artificially low. Now, the reason I'm going through all this is because after the last video I did on motorcycling and stalling out, well, I got a lot of comments about how motorcycles just cost too much money, interest rates are too high, young people just can't afford them. But when I look back on my life, I wonder, well, when has that ever been different? At 20 years of age, I didn't have the extra money to buy that KZ440. I literally had to work hard and save the money so that I didn't have to pay that 14% interest rates. And it took me more than a year, right, to, again, save that cash so that I could buy my first motorcycle. Right now, I know that there are some of you who are watching this video going, "Oh God, another boomer who doesn't understand how bad we young people have it today." And you know what? You're right. Because back when I was young, back in 1975 to around 1989, well, inflation was worse than it is today, right? And my real wages were going down much faster than they are right now. The mid-70s and early 80s was a time of a historically slow economy, runaway inflation, and very high interest rates. A gallon of gas costs $1.19, which is equivalent of $4.80 today. Now here in Massachusetts, over the course of 2024, regular gas averaged about $3.49 a gallon. And premium, well, it went for about $4.40. So again, using that inflation calculator from the BLS, if I had $100 in 1975, in order to purchase the same amount of goods in 1990, just 15 years later, right, I would need over $240. In contrast, if I had $100 starting in 2008, about the time the market crashed, in order to purchase the same amount of goods today, I would need $143. Now, a couple of things that we boomers didn't have to deal with that, of course, young people do today, is we didn't have a 24-hour news cycle or a social media network that wants to tell you how bad everything is. Right? We also didn't have the myriad of choices to spend our money on that, again, young people have today. I mean, things like $1,200 smartphones and, of course, the subscription to maintain them and subscriptions to every premium TV network that you can possibly imagine. Another thing that I see young people spending their money on today are concerts. And again, I did this too. I think it was awesome to go to concerts. All right, so there's nothing wrong with it. However, when I went to my first concert, it cost $6.50 to go to the show, to see Foghat, Head East, and Styx. Styx opened up the show, right, before they were a very well-known band. Well, that concert today would cost $37 and change. But really, how many big-name bands can you go to see that? How many can you go see for under $100 or $200? And of course, there are numerous other things that you can get, like TVs and computers and gaming consoles, right? And the latest cool sneakers to buy. But all of these things, just like motorcycles, are luxury items. They're not things that we need. Right? And that is one problem that, again, younger people have to deal with. There are a few things that have gone up higher than the rates of inflation, right? And that would include, of course, home or, housing costs. That would include food costs and also healthcare. And in addition, we encourage our young people to go out and spend a lot of money getting an education, which may not have the return on investment that they expect. But you know what? I did that too. Now, of course, spending your money on things other than motorcycles is not a bad thing, right? Every generation doesn't have to like the same things that the previous generations did. But for me, it gets down to this one thing, is that if you really want to do something, don't let anything stand in your way. Figure out a way to make it happen. See, that 20-year-old kid that we met way back there in the Wayback Machine, well, he didn't get up every morning and worry about how high the inflation rate was or what the current interest rate was. He just knew that he wanted to buy a motorcycle, so he was going to figure out a way to do that. Even if it meant he had to wait, that he had to save his money to do it. But still, he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. He had a goal. He wanted to buy that motorcycle, and he chose one, the KZ440, that he could afford, that would fit within his budget. He might have wanted to buy the biggest Harley that he could find, but he knew that he couldn't afford to do that. So rather than just say, well, if I can't have it all, I'm just not going to do it anything. Well, he said, no, I'm going to get what I can afford, and we'll get started. We'll get my foot in the door, and then we can worry about finding something bigger and better later on. And again, I know, oh, boomer, you just don't understand. But you know what? See, I do understand. Right? I've been through some shit in my life. Right? My parents went through some shit in their lives. And you know what? You, as a young person, are gonna go through some shit in your life. And I'm sorry for the tough love, but that's just the way the world works. You can spend all your time worrying about the societal pressures or the asshole boomers on YouTube that won't let you get what you want, but in the end, it's really up to you. See, I know that you guys are much smarter than my generation was at the same age. You're better educated, right? You have been around the block a few times, and I know that if we can figure it out, I know that you can too. You see, at 40 years old, I had spent a lot of money on an education that wasn't giving me the return on investment. So rather than sit there and cry and try to make it work, I said, you know what? It is time for a change, right? So I went out and I pursued another course, right? I gave up that profession that I had spent all that money on, and I went and I found something else to do. And that made all the difference. It allowed me, again, not until I was 40 years old to really start saving any money, to buy a home, right? To do any of the things that I really wanted to do. It takes time, right? You're not going to have it all right away. But again, as I said, I know that if I can do it, you can do it too. So keep riding safe and keep squeezing your lemon.